Can breathwork help us achieve our goals?
100%. What I mean by that is a lot of the people that I'm working with, the high achievers, they do a lot. They have big, lofty goals. The problem is they're not balanced, they're not regulated. Breathwork allows you to have that regulation, not only allows you to reduce the stress in your life, it increases your cognitive ability. Breathwork can help deliver more oxygen to your brain, focus, but also creativity. We can work 20% less. When we are working, we're more focused, more efficient, working on the right things, working on things that move the needle, and we're increasing our output. So work 20% less hours for more output. Now, all of a sudden, because these people are high achievers, they're going, okay, what am I doing with this 20% of time, right? Some people might take time to rest, learn something completely different, but at least 10% of their time is now invested into upskilling, which means that it's going to over time compound and it's going to further increase their output, their performance, and they're achieving towards their goals. They're getting promotions, they're getting salary increases, but they're doing that living a happier life. They're working on the things that matter, they're working on the things that they care about, and they're doing much better in those things, but they're able to strip out certain things that don't serve them.
Ciaran, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I wonder if we could start with a little breathwork demo just to ground us.
Fantastic idea. Yeah, let's just start maybe with a simple breath awareness, Jason. So I'll invite you and whoever is listening can follow through as well.
Unless you're driving. If you're driving, don't do this.
Unless you're driving. Good spot. Just in your seated position, if you want, just maybe get into a comfortable position, move around, make sure that your back is straight. And just as you start to slow everything down, and as you inhale and exhale, on your next exhale, I'll invite you to gently close your eyes. I'm going to leave everything just settle for a second. Your back is straight. Your head is held up high. Your lips are sealed. Teeth not touching. And you're breathing in and out through your nose. Start to notice your breath. The air coming in your nose, hitting the back of your throat. And just imagine that air filling your lungs and delivering oxygen to your entire body. The air coming in might be colder than the air leaving your nose. And it's effortlessly in and gently leaving your body again. I'm going to invite everyone just to follow the air in and out. There's no right or wrong. There's no pace to follow. But just try and really focus on that air and notice it come in your nose, down your throat, filling your lungs, and back out. As you get comfortable with that, just slow your breathing down ever so slightly. 10% slower, 10% less air in and out. Slowing it down until you feel a very light sense of air hunger, and try and just stay at that point, breathing in and out through your nose. Maintain your focus on your breath. Staying at that point of air hunger. The mind quietens. Muscles in your bodies relax, and everything slows down. Just as you open up your eyes, as you come to conclusion in your breath, just maybe look away from the screen, look around your environment. And whenever you feel ready, we can come back to center. How do you feel, Jason?
Bit better. Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much. That was cool.
So this is the practice I use every morning. I sometimes struggle to call it a tool because you're just basically breathing in and out through your nose, slowing it right down. But I've struggled with meditation over the years because my mind has been too busy. This allows me to focus on the breath, so it gives me a focus on something, which means I'm not focusing on everything else. And what we're doing is that we're increasing carbon dioxide in our body, which is allowing us to deliver more oxygen to our organs. We can talk a little bit more about that maybe in our conversation, but this type of breathing resets our nervous system, slows down our heart rate, and delivers more oxygen to our organs, including our brain.
Awesome. All right. Shall we start? I say start. Shall we begin? Shall we continue with telling us what's the journey that you've been on that's brought you to where you are today?
Oof, that's a broad question. Where do I start?
Go as deep as you fancy.
Go as deep as I fancy. I guess maybe something going right back. I come from quite an international family. I was born in Italy. My dad's Italian. My mother is Irish. We moved to Ireland when I was 12, and I've been living in Spain for the last 10 years, married to a Russian lady. So quite an international household that we live in. But I spent the last 20 years building a career in the corporate world, starting in consultancy and then moved into the software industry, always in a sales capability. So quite a high pressured environment, international and global roles. So I used to be on a plane every single week, spending a number of days a week away from the family. And 2.5 years ago, I hit burnout with a mini stroke while I was out running with my friends, which was kind of a turning point and the beginning of my second career, let's say. And it was kind of as a recovery to that I came to know breathwork. And my goal now would be to try and bring breathwork back into the corporate world to support people and prevent burnout. So I use it as a recovery. I would like to see it as a tool to help people prevent burnout.
And what is a mini stroke?
What is a mini stroke? So I woke up that morning, dropped my parents off to the airport, drove back to Sitges, the town where I live at, just outside Barcelona, and I went for a run with my friends. I would describe it that I felt that my hearing and my vision were heightened. And it felt like a little bit, everything was slightly slower, sound was a little bit off, like I was in a little bit of a matrix. I just put it down to tiredness because I'd just been away with my wife for a week in Cyprus at a HYROX training camp. And as I started running, the guys were asking me about my training camp in Cyprus, and I started to not find the words. So I was still able to speak, but like simple words like restaurant. I wanted to say restaurant, but I couldn't find that word. And my speech started to feel slightly slurred. Now, one of my friends jokingly said to me, look, we were speaking Spanish. He said, maybe switch to English. You're too tired to speak Spanish. And I did that. And the same words I couldn't find in Spanish, I now couldn't find in English.
Wow.
So that's when I started to get worried and eventually got pins and needles in my face and my arm. And I kind of knew that then I was in trouble. Stupidly, instead of telling my friends, I said, I'm too tired. I'm going to run back to the car. I was probably about 2 kilometers away from my car, realized I hadn't brought my phone with me. So I had to run the whole way back to my car with this fear of something is happening. I'm not sure I quite knew what it was, but I did feel it was something quite serious.
Wow. And what happened after that? Did you go and get it checked out? Did you leave it for a little while? Like what?
No, so as I was running down the seafront, I was afraid that, I don't know, in my head, I was like, I'm going to have a heart attack or something like this. That's how it felt. So I was spotting people and going, okay, if something happens to me now, I'll grab this person and ask them for help. Then I would pass that because I kept running stupidly. As I passed that person, I'd say, I'm going to grab this other person and I'm going to ask them for help. Eventually, I got to my car. I got home and my wife was in bed and I tried to wake her up to tell her what was happening. But of course, I couldn't. At that stage, my speech was all over the place. It was just googly goop, We got on the phone to our insurance company and they told us to rush into Barcelona because the local hospital here doesn't have a neurology department. And when we got in there, that's when they kind of confirmed, look, he's had a mini stroke. Luckily, because of my age and my health, they said there was no long-term impact. And we spent the next 6 months then with the cardiologist and the neurologist trying to run different tests just to make sure that there wasn't something more behind it and that there was definitely no long-term impact from it. And the conclusion after 6 months was, you're healthy, you can go back to your normal life. It's a lifestyle thing. And when we went through some of the things from a lifestyle perspective, they basically said, if you don't change, and they were particularly talking about my work lifestyle, the next step will probably be a heart attack, and you may not be as lucky as you were this time.
Wow.
But I'm here to tell the tale.
Yeah. Thankfully. What did that recovery journey look like?
It's funny because that's a question I get asked a lot, Jason. And in my mind, there was no recovery in the sense that I probably did another few weeks of work, even though I decided I need to give up that work. But I was trying to figure out how to do it, when to do it, and what was going to come next. And then my wife was very clear that, I was to take 6 months off. I was not to think about or to discuss with anyone what my next step would be. She said, you need to take 6 months off, just spend time with the kids and just completely switch off, which is actually what I did. So I had a couple of other like smaller minor incidents in the weeks following because I was still in work. But as soon as I gave up that job and I dedicated myself 100% to the family and the kids, I feel like I was already recovered at that stage, right? The only thing that stayed was one, emotionally, this loss of identity. I was the head of sales, I was this software executive, whatever my titles or whatever painting names that we give ourselves. But from an emotional perspective then, or a health perspective, I felt immediately very good. So I did take a few months off, kind of strenuous exercise and stuff like that. But on a day-to-day, in my mind, I was recovered.
I guess it was almost like an invitation to ground yourself.
Yeah, I talk about it now, Jason, as probably the best thing that ever happened to me because, I all throughout those years, I don't know if I would change it because I really enjoyed that time. It was an incredible learning experience. It provided me opportunities that, I'm super grateful for. But I always constantly had this guilt of being away from the kids, being away from the family, not pulling my weight in the house, things like that. So that while I was really enjoying what I was doing and I was enjoying those successes and the rewards that I was getting from them, I had this constant guilt. And stopping for those 6 months and let's call it my new career now, is allowing me to be a lot more present with my kids, both physically, but more important mentally. Because even when I was at home, my wife would say I wasn't there, right? There was times that we went away with the kids for the weekend and I've got complete memory loss of some of those weekends. There was one incident that my wife was talking about a weekend we'd been away and I had no recollection. I said, well, what are you talking about? And I said, okay, describe the place to me. And I got real frustrated at myself that I couldn't remember. And she was saying, but Ciaran, like you were super happy. We had a great time. I was saying, okay, describe the restaurant, describe the Airbnb we were in. And I think it was on day 3 that some of the images started coming back and my memory started to return. So things like that were a little bit scary, right? Because at the same time, you'd ask me about a deal that we signed 5 years ago in work and I would tell you every single detail. So clearly my mind was 100% focused on work and everything else suffered in my life, I guess, right? From my attention and my presence.
Yeah, that cognitive cost to constantly be, thinking of things or whatever. And it's interesting because I see some similarities to my own experience at the moment, certainly the HYROX stuff, but for example, like I'm single, so I spend a lot of time
Yeah.
thinking and reflecting and journaling and all the stuff, So I have to make sure that I make space for meditation and stillness and stuff like that, because it's an absolute necessity when you're kind of like constantly on that in that go mode. But I thought about it then, and I was like, wow, yeah, like imagine if I had like kids and it would, in this sort of like very analytic world, you'd be like, oh wow, there's like 3 other projects there that I've got to think about.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, I talk a lot about productivity and output with my current coaching clients in the business world. I mean, but ironically, the fact that you have kids and a family sometimes is probably what can get you through it. One, because it can be a distraction so that you're not 100%
Mm,
focused on thinking about work. I always used to say that, if I didn't have the family and the kids, I probably would have had a heart attack a long time ago, because the only thing that got me away from work and thinking about work and doing works from time to time was because I had the family and I had to do things, or I wanted to do things with them. But, I always think about this thing that we have different buckets that represent our life. And one of those buckets is work. But then you've got, in my case, the father bucket, the husband bucket, the friend bucket, the athlete bucket, or whatever else, the breathwork coach bucket. If I'm pouring everything into any of those buckets, I'm out of kilter. And what happened with me is that I poured everything into the work bucket all day, every day. Even when I was with the family, I was thinking about work. And once that tipped over, all my other buckets are empty. And that's where you get burnout. That's where you get depression. That's where you get all the issues that people suffer. I think if you manage to balance those out and put a little bit in every one of those buckets, if any of those fall over, it's not the end of the world, because I've got all these other things. And my identity was 100% soaked into being that work, that leader, that sales, that executive, whatever it was. So when I lost that, I kind of ended up losing everything. I was lucky that I had a supportive wife that allowed me to rebuild my other buckets as that
mm.
work bucket was lying over for those 6 months.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we're talking about this as well, because just at the moment, I'm trying to let me say, like be a little bit more equanimous in like managing those peaks. Because like I don't drink, right? But just because you don't drink doesn't mean that you can't like go into a dip or whatever. And HYROX training, which we will get into, can be like this, like Saturday mornings, I'm at the HYROX class, I'm charging down a load of espressos, I'm flying, and then later on in the afternoon, I'll just go,
Yeah.
because it's such a big high.
With my breathwork coach practice, I've been really getting interested in the nervous system, and the idea of stress and the idea of crashing and burnouts and stuff like that. The reality about stress is that stress is necessary for survival. So what you're describing is an acute stress. I think what's happening in today's world is, one, we don't have the rest post stress
Mm,
to recover. Let's say we call it the recovery, even in a sporting analogy. But we got this kind of chronic stress that's humming in the background all the time, right? Whether it's work, whether it's our mind thinking, the journaling practice you talked about, ironically, that's a good practice to get stuff out of your mind down onto paper. But if it's a constant and you're constantly thinking about it, you don't allow it to get out, then you're thinking about something else, you end up having this medium to high level of stress that's humming in the background. That becomes normal, so you don't notice it. And it's only
mm,
in a moment where you might take time off and really unplug and really slow things down that you go, bloody hell, I now realize that I was stressed at that moment in time. And that's why for me, breath work is so powerful, because you can give yourself, and particularly your nervous system, these moments of rest and digest throughout the day. I'm talking 2 to 3 minutes of breathing throughout the day. And it's basically like resetting your nervous system again, right? You talked about HYROX. If we talk about sports analogies, a lot of the top athletes are having a number of naps throughout the day. And if they're not napping, they're definitely sitting there doing very little throughout the day. So they have very high intensity training sessions, but they have to have that recovery afterwards. Otherwise, their next training session, they're not going to be able to peak at that level. So the peaking during training is important and is necessary for them, for their performance. But the reason why they can do it and we can't is because they're 100% dedicated to that, which includes the recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I always thought like if I ever got to the stage where I could take my training, I was going to say seriously, more seriously, because I take it quite serious already. It would be, dropping some time at work so that I could nap.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at doing the nap thing actually, but I'm like, I think like I need two.
Yeah, what I do, which is very helpful, Jason, after any run or training session, I've actually recently switched from the HYROX style training to, I'm attempting my first ultra marathon this year, but after every run or workout, whether it be weights or high intensity, I take 5 minutes to breathe slow and make sure that I can actually feel and notice my heart rate decreasing. And it's resetting everything. Because what was happening to me is when I was working late, I'd work till 1 or 2 o'clock. I'd get up at 5, I'd do an hour training session, high intensity. From there, I'd run upstairs, shower, drive to work, get into the office. There was no pause. There was no resetting. My heart rate was constantly elevated. My nervous system was constantly jacked. And, the doctor was very clear with me, because I said, oh, well, actually, the last 2 years, it hasn't been so bad. He said, Ciaran, this is 15 years in the making. This is not something that can affect your health in 6 months. And the unfortunate thing is over those 15 years, as I was describing earlier, I didn't notice that my nervous system was humming like that in the background. To me, that was normal. And it's only now that I understand it and that I have a slightly different lifestyle that I can recognize, yeah, I was definitely hitting burnout and I should have known at the time.
Yeah. What, just going back to the when you had your stroke, like how old were you at the time?
Well, I'm 41 now, so I was 38, 39.
You're looking good, mate. So 38, and like, what was your diet like? What were you eating well? Like, what's
My diet has actually always been pretty good. I mean,
yeah,
this is I don't want to say scary thing, right? But in general, I would say that my lifestyle was pretty good. Now, I've given up alcohol as well over the last 3 years, but I was drinking at the time and I was very much a social drinker. And what I probably would say is that those nights when I was working till 1 or 2, there was quite often a glass of vino or a beer in my hand, right, as I was working. So while it was done in a relatively moderate way, it was probably there a lot, let's say, right? So from that perspective, it probably wasn't healthy. But my food has never been that bad. And even when I was traveling, which is where people tend to fall off the horse, I'd always try and find if there was a healthier option for me. So everything else was not so bad. I was training, as I said. Now, the doctor said that because I was so stressed, that the type of training I was doing wasn't ideal because, again, it was high intensity. So that is a stressor to the body, as we talked about. And if you're not doing the recovery afterwards, you're just adding stress to an already stressed body. So the problem was really this fact of not having these troughs after the peak. So there was no rest, there was no reset. And I genuinely believe, which is something that some people have asked me, is if I knew what I know today, 10 years ago, could I have prevented burnout? And I'm 100% sure. And that is why I have this calling and this passion to now bring it back into the corporate world, because I think that we all need to perform, we all need to work. But by using some of these tools and habits, I think that we can actually, our output and our performance can increase, maintaining a regulated nervous system and therefore not hitting burnout.
It seems to me that modulation seems key to a lot of this, moving between like almost like not skipping a step, from going into high to then like really low or whatever. And it's like trying to like slow it down when you're moving into these different states.
Yeah. I would say it can be kept quite simple, Jason. As we said, like even just that breath awareness, like we literally did a very small exercise, but part of that is also to notice what's happening in your body. Where's the tension? Where the little tingles that you're feeling, right? The body is an amazing tool or an amazing thing, and it knows what we need. The problem is that we're constantly in our thinking mind. So we're not listening to the body. By quieting the thinking mind, whether it's meditation, breath work, or other practices, we're allowing ourselves to listen to the body. And if I had that ability to listen to the body, I would have known that I was in trouble before it happened.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take a lot. As I said, like I genuinely believe that if someone had a constant practice of 3 to 5 minutes in the morning, 3 minutes at lunchtime, and 3 to 5 minutes in the evening of what we just did, I would argue that's probably enough, because it has a huge knock-on effect on everything else that you're doing. You're less reactive. Breath work can, it affects your digestive system, your heart health, your brain health, your nervous system. We talked about that already. Like, it has such a knock-on effect on everything that's why I believe it's the one single most valuable tool to basically living a healthier life, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I feel like the morning meditation always gets done. That's something that I never struggle with. It's just routine for the last 10 years or so. But
Wow.
trying to do it in the middle of the day or at the end of the day, that's been harder to build that habit. Because that's like, morning routines are so easy, aren't they? Because you're just like step, 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 and usually no interruptions. Versus the middle of the day, it's messy, so that requires a different level of discipline.
Yeah. What if I told you that 3 minutes was enough?
I'd believe you. I'd believe it. I have experimented in the past, but it's never stuck.
Yeah.
Because interestingly, I noticed. So going back to, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago, similar to you actually, I could work and work and work and work and work, but I would, exactly the same as you, glass of wine,
Yeah.
up until midnight, and it was quite fun.
Yeah.
Bit of a rush, right?
Yeah. Big time.
Because it just takes the edge off that stress element, and then you've just got the kind of the fun part of work, and
Yeah.
like coming up with ideas and stuff. And yeah, and then that for me, like, went into like SSRIs, and then went down that route, and then a few years later, everything went to shit, and it was like, okay, everything's going out, stop taking prescription drugs and all the rest of it anyways. But yeah, I definitely feel that stress response when working,
Right.
like that, that feeling where it's just like you're almost in like this fever dream, like this mania. It's like, and you kind of feel a bit angry and kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So but yeah, it's something I've tried to deploy, to manage those things.
I mean, it makes sense. It's the little and often, right? I tell people, whether it's your daily practice or whether it's throughout the day, it's like what they say about exercise, right? In the modern society, what we're doing is we go to the gym for an hour, we absolutely beast ourselves for the hour, and then we're sitting at the desk all day.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make a ton of sense, right? And they say that it's much better, and depending on what your goal is, but for longevity and for your body, it's much better to do 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes mid-morning, 15 minutes a lot, for argument's sake, right? Just as an example. And for me, with these practices, it's exactly the same, because one, as you said, it's easy to get. The problem is you can get obsessed by your morning routine as well, right? I mean, when I started, then what happened, I applied the obsession I had with work to these things. And if I missed the morning meditation, I was like, oh, my whole day is screwed. So I was stressing over my morning routines that were supposed to remove the stress. And now I'm taking a slightly different approach to these things, right? And even when I work with people in a coaching capacity, whether it's around their wellness or whether it's around business, 80% compliance is good enough. So if we're putting something in place, if you can do it 80% of the time or 80% good enough, I'm happy.
Yeah. And I think there's different levels, isn't there? Like some people may need to start with the slightly structured morning routine, but then the people who have got the structured morning routine might need to de-optimize that a little bit.
Yeah, it's like the meditation thing, right? I built and I do similar to what I was just describing. I do it's it's a breath meditation is what I would call it, right? So I don't do guided, I don't do completely silent with anything. I'm following my breath, right? And then I'll adapt different patterns depending on what I need. But most of the time it's a very simple one that we just did this morning. And I built that up to 20 minutes. I've never been like a 1 hour meditation kind of guy. And what was happening when it was 20 minutes, that then if I was delayed getting up or I got distracted, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to fit it in. I'll leave it. While now I do 5 minutes.
Yes.
But I do that every morning because it's hard to find an excuse to say I don't have 5 minutes, right? And I genuinely believe that 5 minutes is nearly as good as doing the 20 minutes or the hour. And, I had an incident a couple of weeks ago where I kind of reacted to my kids misbehaving at home. And I said to my wife, I said, bloody hell, here am I talking about regulating nervous system, and I blew it. But I realized I hadn't been doing my breath in the morning for about 2 weeks. So it has an immediate impact on the way in which you behave throughout your day, not just in work, but at home, right? How do you behave as a husband, a father, a friend, whatever that may be?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, I've just launched like a bit of a habit building community, like a free thing. And, you'll have read Atomic Habits, I would presume, right? And it's like these micro habits and like the 1 minute meditation, if you fall off the wagon, the 1 minute thing is really good. And like you say, you'd be surprised what you can get, how much you can achieve in 1 minute in terms of like, bring yourself back to center.
Absolutely.
So, can breathwork help us achieve our goals?
100%. What I mean by that is, and if we take it in the business context, right? A lot of the people that I'm working with, they're obviously high achievers. They do a lot. They have big, quite lofty goals. The problem is this issue around they're not balanced, they're not regulated. Breathwork allows you to have that regulation. Not only allows you to reduce the stress in your life, it increases your cognitive ability. We talked about how breathwork can help deliver more oxygen to your brain, focus, cognitive ability, but also creativity. So what I'm playing around with at the moment with a lot of my business clients is we can work in terms of hours worked 20% less. So when we are working, though, we're more focused, we're more efficient, we're working on the right things, we're working on things that move the needle, and we're increasing our output. So work 20% less hours for more output. Now, all of a sudden, because these people are high achievers, they're going, okay, what am I doing with this 20% of time, right? Some people might take time to rest even more or whatever that may be, learn something completely different. But in most times, at least half of that, so at least 10% of their time is now invested into upskilling, which means that it's going to over time compound and it's going to further increase their output, their performance, and their achieving towards their goals. So basically what I'm trying to do, and we've had early signs of this working with more junior leaders, and within a very short space of time with our coaching practice, they're getting promotions, they're getting salary increases, but they're doing that in what they're describing in living a happier life, right? So they're working on the things that matter, they're working on the things that they care about, and they're doing much better in those things, but they're able to strip out certain things that don't serve them. And now in September, we're just launching a course where we're kind of bringing that online and allowing people over 10 weeks to go through all these learnings that we're getting from founders, CEOs, and senior leaders to kickstart the career for maybe more junior leaders who want to improve, or even aspiring leaders who want to become leaders, right? So within 10 weeks, we're distilling all that down and we're launching that in September.
That's awesome. And what about the word founder? May be obvious, but it's almost like it's a bit of an American term, isn't it? Like it used to be like business person, entrepreneur. Is there like a definition of a founder? Does it have to be like, VC backed, or like talk a little bit about that?
So in terms of the type of clients that we work with, they're typically founders of early stage businesses, which may be pre-seed, seed, ABC in the investment cycle. And it's B2B and typically in a vertical industry. What I mean is that they're 100% focused. I spend a lot of my time working in software for pharmaceuticals, so in life sciences. So just because of that, people in that space tend to be attracted more by our experience, let's say, but it doesn't have to be. But what we're doing is, and because of my background from a sales perspective, a lot of it is around, okay, how I have a great idea. As a founder or that CEO of that business, they are not commercially, they don't have a commercial background. They're more a product focused person or technically focused person, an academic focused person. And I'm helping them then to scale and grow the commercial side of that business. Now, when we work longer term with that, then it becomes, and I've had a couple of my clients that come to me for commercial advisory that now have become their coach as well, right? So I'm working with them as a business coach, and then little by little, we actually get into some of the other areas of their life. And as you can imagine, just because of my my path, I guess breathwork becomes quite a key part of that. And the other thing that we're doing now is that some of them are bringing us in, some leaders are bringing us in to do team coaching with their entire business, which is improving communication, reducing conflict, all those things that we can do from a business perspective. But we always start the day with breathwork. And then we utilize that because people open up with breathwork to build closer connections within the team. And we had one customer that came over to Spain for a full day workshop with us. And they said that they walked away knowing each other better after that one day than the 3 previous years working together. Because all of a sudden now they were connecting, they were opening up, they were sharing personal things. And in a way where we're all working with our colleagues remotely, most of us don't know our colleagues. Most of us don't know what's going on at home. So you might be reactive to me and I might think, hey, Jason, I won't use bad words, but is not a nice person or doesn't like me. But what I don't know is that Jason has tons going on in the background. So now all of a sudden, Jason has opened up to me. Not only I appreciate and I accept his reaction to me or his behavior towards me, now I'm supportive towards Jason and I want to help Jason. It creates a whole new dynamic within the team. This team went from the leader being the only person speaking on their team meetings on a weekly basis to there being healthy conflict between all the players on that team. Because now everybody went from working in silos to working towards a common goal and having the trust and the connection to be able to challenge each other towards that goal.
Do you think it's possible to nurture what you've just described in an online based business, or do you think there needs to be that physical?
That's such a great question. So one of the things that we believe is that we can do some of the coaching online, but that typically we would say, whether it's on a quarterly basis or something, to get the team out of their business environment. So specifically, we would always prefer, if at all possible, to get them out of their office, out of the working environment. In an absolutely ideal scenario, bring them into somewhere where it's in nature and then do that type of work at least once a quarter or once every 6 months in person. We do believe that having done that work, we can then carry it through for the following 6 months remotely or online. But I think it's very hard to replace human connection, Jason, when you're trying to build trust. And that's why even from a sales or commercial capacity, now that we're gone back in a post-COVID environment, connection, personal connection and building trust and rapport with your customers, it has to happen in person, right? Otherwise, you will never get that deep relationship and that deep connection. It will always be somewhat transactional.
Would you care to tell us like a few pointers or frameworks for if someone's saying, yeah, I love the idea of that. I'm gonna book a trip to Center Parcs or whatever with my team. Like, what is a decent schedule to? Because I would imagine as well, a lot of people have anxiety around. They go into nature to spend time with the bosses, and all they talk about is work, right?
Yeah. So I think what you're describing is the old way of doing team building, right? Which is, let's get them out, let's go do something fun, then throw a couple of grand behind the bar, let them have a blowout, and great, we've built team, we've built morale, we've built all this. Now that might be right, but that morale building lasts hours, right? It doesn't go past the end of that week. What we're doing is that we're using our leadership experience, because we spent 20 years each, me and this partner of mine, Samuel, and in the business, 20 years each on the field, leading these types of teams and organizations. On top of that, our coaching qualification, but also coaching practice over the last number of years. So what we do is we say we're not doing team building. We're doing it. We call it a team experience, right? So we're using some of these tools to do some work, which is not specific around setting goals for the next quarter, but we do teach some things around maybe some of the communication, some of the team building from what I just described, getting to know each other. And one of the things that we typically say is that people that come to our team experiences, they leave not only having learned something, but having felt something. Right. So we do get a lot deeper than just working on goals and things like that. And that's why we believe that value carries forward. We give them tools and we work with them on things that they can use on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't end with the team experience that they have with us offside. And the additional thing is that some of these things will help them not just in work, but in every aspect of their life. Right. And that's why people like it. It's a 360 degree rather than, as you said, just go in there and talk about work.
Yeah. It's almost like, I talked earlier about, just doing the morning meditation but then if you just lose all your mindfulness for the rest of the day, it's kind of like that integration is clearly key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any warning signs of burnout, early indicators?
There's tons. The problem, Jason, is because, as I said, we're in the busy mind, we don't pay attention to them. So for about 2 years before I had my mini stroke, I was having chest pains. I was having tightness in the chest. I mentioned the forgetfulness. That's just one of the many examples. I've had examples of leaving keys behind, going to pay something with a credit card and walking away, and the person saying, "Excuse me, sir, your card." Walking away from a coffee shop and leaving my phone on the table. Leaving a laptop on an airplane. I've got so many of these, and in hindsight, they were all signs. Now, I was getting these signs. I didn't pay attention to these signs, so these signs started getting progressively worse until I hit the mini stroke, and that was the way of my body to really say, "Hey, you really need to pay attention this time." And as the doctor said, it would have more than likely got even more serious if I hadn't paid attention 2.5 years ago.
What about, are there any more scientific measures to look out for? Like, would you generally just have an increased blood pressure, for instance, or is that sort of stuff that we could track as well? Maybe if you're not that good at being aware of yourself.
I think the problem with the blood pressure is typically at a moment in time, right? I mean, most of us now have wearables on our wrists, so maybe things like your sleep, but not just the hours in which you're sleeping, but what we call the quality of sleep, right? Deep sleep, REM. I doubled my time in deep sleep and REM through breathwork. The other one is your resting heart rate. If that's a good indicator that your body is not recovering. So if some of these are elevated or more elevated than they should be, then for me, those are all very practical signs that you're not living a healthy life. And it's very important, Jason, to say that, what we talk about with our clients is I'm not asking people to work less necessarily, right? I genuinely believe that you can still put in those 8, 10, whatever hours you're putting into your work. They have to be focused hours. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. And that's why I'm talking about, the prioritization, time management, focusing and things like that. But if they are focused, then that's good. What you need to add in is these moments of rest. You need to allow your body to recover, right? In sport, we call it periodization, right? You're not just going hell for leather all the time, all season round. You've got your off season. In work, I don't think, apart from 2 weeks a year, I don't think anyone has an off season from work, right?
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned that you doubled your deep sleep using breath work. Any particular protocol?
So there's a couple of different things that I started doing. One is just that breath awareness, so just being aware of the breath. The mechanics of the breath is also very important. So when we're talking about breath awareness, what you want to make sure is that the movement is in your diaphragm and not in your chest. When we're breathing shallow, our chest is moving up and down, but it's actually deep into our lungs where we have most of the red blood cells, where we can deliver that oxygen from the air into the bloodstream. So the practice of trying to breathe deeper by expanding your diaphragm and moving your ribs outwards as well. A lot of the time in breathwork or yoga, we talk about belly breathing. It's not strictly correct, but it does help people to think about breathing deeper. Really, if you look at it from a mechanical perspective, the best way to describe it is to have your ribs going outwards. So if I empty my lungs and then I fill them up again, you can see the body expanding this way. And in doing so, I have to engage my diaphragm, and therefore I'm pushing, let's say, the air, for better use of a word, down to the bottom part of my lungs. And that's allowing me to transfer more oxygen, from the air to the bloodstream. Now, we talked about nasal breathing and the importance of nasal breathing. Mouth breathing means that we're dumping carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide a lot of the time is seen as a waste gas, but actually that's the gas that allows the oxygen to decouple from the blood. We talked about blood oxygen going from the air to the blood, but then we need that to get from the blood to the organs. So the blood goes to every extremity in your body, and then with the presence of carbon dioxide, it decouples and delivers to the organs. Now, you've heard me talk about by breathing, we can improve the delivery to our organs, including our brain. So by maintaining higher levels of carbon dioxide in our body, we're delivering more oxygen to our brain. Now, the confusing part is that I increase carbon dioxide by reducing the way in which I'm breathing, right? I'm not dumping air through my mouth. So by good mechanics and by breathing correctly through my nose, I can breathe in less air but deliver more oxygen to my body. There's a great book by James Nestor called Breathe. If you haven't read it, or if anyone hasn't read it, it's an absolute must. It's a great read. It's an easy read as well. It simplifies a lot of the things that we're talking about. That's why I liked it. I like things in simple terms. And it was like mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, that book was a bit of a gateway drug for me into like all this like alternative health space, shall we say. Yeah, very interesting. I did my first HYROX, I did it fully nasal. So that there's like some footage of me like going through the farmer's carriage just like yeah, I feel like but I used to like change my breathing style every HYROX, and then there's one where I'm like Wim Hof breathing all the way around.
That would be interesting. I'm curious to hear how that went. But with the breathing, Jason, I think about having like 3 gears, right? In and out through your nose, gear 1. In through your nose, out through your mouth, gear 2. And when you're flat out, it's mouth in, mouth out, right? There's nothing you can do about it if you're really pushing hard on those last wall balls before you cross the line.
I'm so excited to tell you about my first ever sponsor. Bear Bar make the highest quality shower soaps. Those of you close to me will know I'm always recommending and gifting them to people. I've actually brought some upstairs from my bathroom to show you. This one is Nebula Nightshade Fresh Cut Pine. This is one of the first ones that they made. It's got like this oaty kind of texture thing. I once described it to Christian, the founder, as like a cheese grater for my feet in a good way. Favorites are Woodsman, Molten Lather, is actually a shampoo bar, and Citrus Burst, which I've used all of that, so I don't have it. Do you remember those like packs you used to get with Pokemon cards? They're kind of like that. They stack it in your bathroom really nicely. You'll definitely dig it. Once you try these, you will never want to go back to £1.99 squeezy plastic horrible fairy liquid style soaps. Trust me, it is an absolute game changer. I don't even bother with moisturizer because I've got this fantastic quality soap and a good diet, of course. There's no plastic. It's made in the UK. Honestly, it's just a 5-star product all around. If you'd like to try Bear Bar, you can get 15% off your first order by going to bit.ly/bearjace. That's BAREJASE to get 15% off. What do you think about Wim Hof breathing?
I practiced it. I enjoy it. I think of breathing in a number of different ways. I think there's the functional side of breathing for health. There's the performance side of breathing for sport, Oxygen Advantage, which I'm qualified in as well, which is part of what you were describing around the nasal breathing for sport performance. And then there's what I call the emotional health. So I'm also just finishing a qualification actually next month. I'm going to be in Ireland for a full week with Pat Divilly, who has a conscious connected breath coaching qualification. And that's the emotional part. And I would put Wim Hof in that space in the sense that what it's doing, it's allowing us to again, bypass the thinking mind to connect with our emotional side. I think there's a place for each one of those, but they're very different in what they deliver. And if someone is struggling with stress or anxiety, while conscious connected and Wim Hof, any of the hyperventilation practices can bring some level of calm after, there's a much higher danger, though, that it actually adds stress to the body as well. Because if I'm anxious, I might go into some sort of an anxiety attack.
It's like, yeah, it's like, because it is it's a potent tool, isn't it? The Wim Hof method, and because if your ears can start ringing and you feel a bit tingly or whatever, but if you're not ready for that, I guess you could then, like you say, go into a panic attack. But if you know to like go, it's almost like a psychedelic trip.
Yeah,
That's
to amazing.
Yeah, to like
And it's
ride it and
masculine energy, right? So if you've got a bunch of mates and you're doing it, like it's great, it's amazing, But what's interesting is you're doing breath holds, but you're doing breath holds after you inhale. So you're giving yourself your best chance to take it as long as you can. With the Oxygen Advantage, you're actually doing your breath holds after you exhale, because you're you're reaching the point where your carbon dioxide increases much quicker, and that's what you want to train, because we have a very low tolerance to that at the moment.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I remember I did the Wim Hof course, and I think he did one when we breathed out and held, and then one where we breathed in, and I can remember. I remember like I'm always like, what's the difference or whatever. And funny enough, we were at a family a weekend away the other day, and I'm very competitive, and I'm just trying to get people to compete with me. So I'm like, let's do some pull-ups, and and then I was like, who wants a breath hold competition? So I did a little bit of Wim Hof. I haven't done it in a very long time. Sat there, and then everyone's looking at me like he's such a weirdo. And then I was like, and I got 3 minutes, so I was pretty impressed with that. And that was exhale, and then 3 minutes. So what is the difference there with the exhale? And I know you alluded to it, but just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, what happened with that 3 minutes? For example, if I was to get you to do it now, there's not a hope you'll get 3 minutes.
No, because I'm
probably struggle to get half of that. The
Yeah.
reason being is what you were doing with the Wim Hof, because you did the Wim Hof breathing before any type of hyperventilation, is you're dumping the CO2 in your body. So we've got these receptors, and basically when we do a breath hold, CO2 starts to build in our body. Because these are very sensitive, the level of CO2 starts to build. These start to scream to your brain, breathe, we're in danger, we're in danger, we're in danger. The ironic thing is, while CO2 is increasing in our body, our oxygen saturation is probably still at 96, 97%, right? Or 95 plus for sure. And so you can go way longer, but they are screaming to your brain, and your brain is perceiving that you're in danger. Now, the training is you start to send messages to your brain, we're safe, we're safe, we're safe. And little by little, you're training these receptors to accept a higher level of CO2 in your body. Now, if I do a breath hold after Wim Hof, I'm completely emptying my body of CO2, so it takes longer for that to build. But I'm not actually training my receptors to accept more CO2. In the Oxygen Advantage protocol, we're doing that without dumping CO2, and we're doing that after the exhale. And therefore, you're basically training those receptors to accept a higher level of CO2. Over time, in breath holds, you do that while you're doing some exercise, you will be able to breathe lower heart rate, your performance starts to improve, and your recovery is faster.
Right. Okay. So what we're saying is dumping the CO2, then the breath hold, not much. Is there any benefit to that other than feeling a bit tingly and being...
So this is where it becomes like, if you think about some of that hyperventilation and what you're doing, it allows to have all these tingling sensations in your body. It's distracting the brain. It's allowing you to connect to a deeper self. This is where you get into maybe the emotional side of things, even going into the spiritual side, depending on what your belief or inclination is in that sense. And some people say that you're allowing certain emotions to come up, because you're moving energy and you're moving gases within your body, you're removing emotions within your body. And then some people go as far as to say that, they get this different type of bliss, nearly spiritual side, connecting to something that's greater than themselves. So
And
for me, the oxygen advantage type protocol, nasal breathing, breath holds during training, that's from a performance perspective. If we're looking at conscious connected breath and Wim Hof, that's much more from an emotional perspective that you're getting the advantages from.
got ya. And then so the oxygen advantage stuff, that's how you're training your CO2 tolerance.
Correct.
So if you have a higher CO2 tolerance, would that mean you were like, does that correlate to like VO2 max or anything like that? Or is it just purely to do with?
It contributes to improving your VO2 max as well, absolutely.
Presumably on like an immediate, it's like a faster recovery or something like that. Is that kind of what's going on there?
So basically what's happening is that you're performing at the same level or higher, but your heart rate is much lower. So the impact on your body is much lower over the course of that training session. And therefore then your recovery from that training session is going to be faster, because you're not putting the same level of stress on your body by performing at the same level.
Cyclic sighing. You know what that one is, right?
No. Talk to me about cyclic sighing.
Do you know Huberman?
Yes.
Andrew? Yeah. So he talks about this. So he did an experiment in his lab, and they were trying to figure out what was the fastest way to recover and bring your heart rate down. And I think they did box breathing. So like 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold. Wim Hof, and then cyclic sighing, which is practiced sometimes in yoga nidra. So it's that one where it's like a long inhale and then a little top up, and then to lungs empty. So obviously it's a limited study. It was only one study, and whatever. It does seem to like have an immediate effect. You know, it's like a little bit more of an intense version of the in for your nose, out for your mouth.
Yeah.
So I tend to use that to recover between sets, between, intervals, stuff like that. Feels horrendous because like if you've just done an 800 meter and then you're and then I have to go and like that CO2 is kind of screaming because I'm holding it in more. What do you think's going on there? Do you think it's a good approach? Do you think it's a load of shit? What?
I don't know, to be totally honest, right? Because I've never compared the two and tried them. Some of the things that are going through my mind is you probably get an immediate benefit, but does it improve your performance over time? I got some concerns over that. And the other thing is I'm struggling to see how you're able to lower your heart rate by doing that, unless it's a really intense exhale. Naturally, like just biologically speaking, when we inhale, our heart rate goes up, and when we exhale, our heart rate goes down. So a lot of times we hear people for relaxation breathwork practices is, extend your exhale, slow down your exhale, because, it's visible. You can actually, if you breathe slowly, but you breathe for long, for, 4, 5, 6 seconds and out again for 4, 5, 6 seconds, you can actually visibly see your heart rate going up and down.
Yes.
Even though there's a lag on your wearable in a lot of cases, right? But what you're describing then with that intensity, I'm not sure if you're as successful in getting your heart rate down. So typically what I would do in that case for recovery is maintain in and out through the nose if I can, and just extend a controlled exhale. I'm not dumping it. It's more like, or if I can, through my nose.
Yeah, and slow it down.
Humming is another way to lower your heart rate, right? So it feels like that, again, we're adding stressors and intensity to recover, which I'm struggling a little bit with, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, do you think it's maybe there should be an emphasis on the exhale? By the way, I didn't really mention that, like the but like not too intense. What about do you think there's some like CO2 tolerance stuff going on there with that kind of that hold? at the top?
The inhale is so strong
Mm-hmm.
that again I'm struggling with that
Yeah.
again, right?
Yeah.
So and also your exhale, right, is quite strong, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
I need to look into it, Jason, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it being used in something like that. I do know that, doing breath holds before a training session increases your red blood cells and therefore increases performance, right? The famous
Mm.
EPO. But
What was that?
as
EPO?
yeah, but as part of the recovery, my personal practice has always been to slow things down.
Mm.
And what I notice is that you visibly feel your breath relaxing, your heart rate going down, and in my mind, relaxed heart rate, you're resetting your nervous system as well, right? So you can go on to the next set or your life, starting from a much better baseline.
Cool. Can we talk a little bit more about like performance breathing? So you mentioned there that EPO. So
Yeah.
what's EPO?
So basically, it's just increasing in the simplest of terms. What we're doing is through the breath holds, we're increasing the red blood cells within your body. So that's the production of EPO from those blood cells is just helping that process that I mentioned around delivering more oxygen to your muscles.
Okay, and what would that what would a typical protocol before training look like?
It can be as simple as do 3 to 5 medium to strong breath holds before your training session. Now, you might decide to do this sitting, you might decide to just walk around. And as you're taking steps, you're breathing normally in and out through your nose. Then you exhale, hold your breath, and then count your steps. You go to a stage where you get to a stage of air hunger, you push your body for an extra 10 steps, for example, so it's medium to strong, and then you recover. Now, because you're going into a high training session, it's not what we call a maximum breath test, right? Or maximum breath hold. It's a medium to strong. You take another couple of steps, normal breathing in and out through your nose, and you do it again. If you do that 3 to 5 times, it has been proven to increase your performance during that specific training session.
Interesting. And on those holds, are you build? Are you increasing the hold each time, or are you just keeping it the same, or are you just going off feel?
You're going off feel, right? So there's no, and again, this is where there's a part of it is, the chemical reaction that's happening within your body telling you that, you need to breathe. And then as you get more used to breath holds and you realize and you kind of train your brain to say that we're safe at that point, you can push yourself past that. What you
Mm.
need to be careful is that the competitive part inside of you is not trying to improve or beat yourself every time, right? Because I think, if you push yourself harder and harder, it can actually have a negative impact then on your performance during that training session. But medium, like whenever the example I always use with clients is when you feel like that you need to breathe, just take an extra 10 steps.
Mm. Would you do that like before you warm up, or would you like do a warm up then maybe do it before you hit the session? Or
You could do it either or. I typically like to do the breath work before, and then I get into my warm up and my session. So start with the breath holds, do your warm up, and into your session.
mm. And I know we already mentioned the Wim Hof thing, but I'm curious because he talks in his book about using it for performance, for athletic performance, and I've experimented with this, and so has my cousin, who recently broke a world record for the most lift weighted via kettlebell clean and press in 1 hour. Shout out to Andy
Wow.
Allen. But we've talked a lot about the Wim Hof thing, and we found that it helped. But then both of us actually have recently dropped it and still performed well. I did a HYROX PB. He did his world record and stuff. And I wondered, is there any scientific evidence behind the Wim Hof method helping in performance? Is there anything there going on at all? Thoughts?
I think there's probably more an emotional and a mental benefit to it, right? Because of that masculine energy that we talked about, it's allowing you to push. And even though you've dumped the CO2, you're still getting your body used to that level of CO2 within your body. So there's definitely a slight adaptation happening there. But I think the biggest thing is this fact of holding on and pushing further, right? So you're training your body to be that in that uncomfortable state. So you could argue that it's very similar to what we talked about in the oxygen advantage, but it's going to take me a lot longer to get to that point because I've dumped the CO2. And that's why my preferred method is more the oxygen advantage protocol, because it gets me the same or better adaptation in a shorter space of time, so I can just get on with my training then.
Okay.
Eventually, when you breath hold when you get to your 3 minutes, you're still getting that adaptation to CO2, because CO2 is building in your body, right? But if I'm doing it at the same time as you're doing it, and you're using a hyperventilation method, and I'm using the oxygen advantage protocol, I'm getting to the same adaptation that you're getting much quicker. It's a much more efficient way of doing it. So it just depends on what you want, right? If you want to set the world record for holding your breath, of course, you need to dump the CO2. If you want to get adaptation faster to performance, then you'll use the oxygen advantage protocol.
The pre-workout one that you were just telling me about, is that the same as oxygen advantage, or is that slightly different?
Part of the protocol, yeah.
Okay, cool. And when free divers, what are they doing?
They're dumping CO2.
So they're doing like the Wim Hof thing.
Yeah, they're hyperventilating. So there's different variations of hyperventilating. Wim Hof being one of the variations of hyperventilation, comes from an ancient type of style of breathwork called Tumo breath. But they're the goats of breath, like the free divers. I mean, they've gotten to a level of CO2 tolerance, and they allow their oxygen to drop. So remember what I said to you, most of us, if we were to track the level of oxygen in our body as we're in our bloodstream as we're holding our breath, most of us won't drop below 90%, but they can get right down to 60% or lower. And that's why you get some of the blackouts that we see in free diving.
Did you see that documentary?
Yeah, I think I know one.
Is it the deepest breath or something?
Yes, something like that it was called, yeah.
Wow, yeah.
It's pretty amazing stuff. Like,
amazing.
The training, the mental capacity, everything in that sport is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's an interesting segue. Are there any risks to practicing breath work?
Yeah, there are. And look, most of the breathwork training is safe in the sense that, as I mentioned, because of our low tolerance to CO2, before anything gets in any way dangerous, our mental capacity, our mental messaging will tell us to start breathing again or to stop pushing and things like that. Now, it really depends on what we're talking about, right? The conscious connected breath that I was talking about, the course I'm doing, it's trauma-informed breath work. So you can remove emotions and trauma that people are carrying that they may not be even aware of carrying that. So there's an emotional risk to that. There are some issues with that kind of hyperventilating type of breath, whether it's the conscious connected or Wim Hof. If you're suffering from epilepsy, high blood pressure, heart disease, mental health, obviously with Wim Hof, there's been some bad press around people getting into the water straight after doing it, because of the blackouts and things like that. You talked about don't do it if you're driving. We are altering our conscious state sometimes with some of these breathwork practices, right? So we do need to be careful of how we use it. The oxygen advantage, I think there's less danger from a health perspective, although all the things around pregnancy, epilepsy, heart disease, and things like that are still very important to get professional advice from your doctor. But in general, it's more the emotional side that I would be concerned around, the conscious connected with people bringing up stuff. And if you're doing it by yourself and you don't have the support of a professional beside you to guide you through it, people can get into a little bit of an anxiety loop and things like that.
Is there any breathwork types that we've not covered?
There's breathwork types that I'm probably not even aware exist.
Yeah.
I mean, It's interesting because it just depends on what is it that you're trying to achieve. As I said, for me, a lot of my focus is on helping people to breathe better. As I mentioned, that has a knock-on effect on many areas of your life and how you go about your life. There's the performance side, which is really down the protocol of the oxygen advantage, improving, I was going to say athletes, but anyone improve their output during sport. And then where I'm digging a lot deeper into recently is this conscious connected. So I would see those are the three big pillars within that. If you just take the conscious connected, which is one of the hyperventilation types, there's tens of different styles of breath work. And because it's becoming a little bit of I don't know, a fashion or a thing at the moment, everybody wants to do breath work or is doing breath work or is exploring breath work, bringing out their own certifications, their own methods. There's all these different types. We talked about Wim Hof. He has obviously been a big driver of bringing breathwork into the modern world, which is absolutely fantastic. What he's done is he's taken Tumo breath, which is an ancient practice, and called it Wim Hof breathing, right? But it's the same style of breathwork. And that's why I say that there's so many different styles of breathwork. Even within Conscious Connected, there's what we call rebirthing breathwork, where the coach is helping you breathe. There's no music, there's no touch, there's no nothing. You're just helping the person to breathe, and they're expected to do all the work. The training I'm doing, we also include music. We do some touch, although others bring a lot of touch into it, acupuncture and things like that. So they're just all different variations of the same thing. But at the heart of it, basically what you're doing is you're helping people to breathe in a pattern that is trying to quiet the thinking brain and connecting deeper at a deeper level within themselves. In doing so, they understand themselves and they're listening to their body better. And the body knows, right? It will bring up whatever it is that you need to look out for.
Yeah, that's cool. Can we do another breathwork practice?
We can. Anything in particular that you'd like to try?
Something a bit more technical.
A bit more technical. What I love about breathwork is that it's simple. So, I try to, use the simplest techniques, but also I try to simplify them as much as possible. What we can do, since we've been speaking about it, but we'll keep it within a couple of minutes, but just to kind of bring you through the technique, is the conscious connected that we spoke about. You'll be very familiar with kind of the technique from Wim Hof, but basically after me telling you that we need to breathe through our nose for a healthier lifestyle, for the conscious connected, while it can be done through the nose, we encourage people to do it through the mouth, right? And that's bringing a very active full inhale in. So the focus in this case is on the inhale, and the exhale is a passive exhale. You're just letting the air fall out of your body. So you're filling your belly and your lungs in with an active inhale that sounds something like, and then you're just letting it fall out with a, so you're not pushing it out like the Wim Hof, where it's more like a forced, and it's not like a lot of yogis will struggle because they control their breath. So it's like a, this is just,
Okay.
So it's like, typically in terms of timings, you'll get the inhale to be 3 to 4 seconds and the exhale is 1 second. So it's passive. And the focus is really on that inhale. As we start a journey, this journey lasts between 45 minutes to an hour. It can go longer as well. The first 10 to 5 minutes is really just around breath awareness and breath mechanics. So as you can imagine, if we just do a couple of sets of this, we're not going to get into the actual journey itself, but it's just to show the complete contrast to what we were doing earlier today.
Yeah.
A lot of the time I would get people to lie down, starting with their hands on their chest and on their belly so that they can feel that coming in and out. In order visually for them to imagine it, in Wim Hof as well, we use this a lot where we say, imagine it like a wave, belly, chest, and out. What I want you to also do is to imagine your ribs going out the way to really fill your lungs full of air, and then back out with that. Okay. If we want, we can just do a couple of rounds sitting up as we are now, just to make it easy. And basically, I'm not going to necessarily cue the speed at which you're doing it. It's just really to get you to get into that rhythm, right? So I want you to start to just inhale through your mouth. Now, there's a little bit of movement in your shoulders, for example. Try and reduce that movement and really use your intercostal muscles to fill your belly and your ribs. Relax your mouth, keep it wide. And the next thing is to try and completely cancel the pause that you're seeing at the end of your exhale. There's no pause at the end of your exhale, or there's no pause at the end of your inhale. So get into a rhythm that's comfortable for you. In, out. In, out. Try to dump less of the air and just let it fall out. And it's you're keeping that breath connected. There's no pausing in and out. And it's when you manage to connect that breath and get into a rhythm that's comfortable for you, that's when we say you're connecting with your deeper self. So over time, you'll start to move energy, you'll start to move emotions, and some things might come up that you're not even aware of. The important thing, Jason, when we go through this practice is that it's not a therapy session. So the goal is not to figure out what's happening. It's just to let it happen and breathe through it. And we use music, we use different cues to help people breathe in that pattern. And you can get emotional expression through exactly what you're doing right now. But as we get through the journey and we start to build and we get to the peak, it starts to become a little bit more intense. So I'll invite people to speed it up, breathe a little bit more air, fill your lungs even more, and just let that process happen. And remembering to remove the pause at the top of the bottom of your breath. When we get to the end of this journey, I invite people to slowly close your mouth, go back to nasal breathing, and just try and just slow down your breathing as much as possible. Because during that breathing phase, Jason, in a real breathwork journey, we will have moved things. People will have had physical and emotional reactions, tremors, change in temperatures, shaking, shouting, crying, whatever that may be. When we get to the phase where we close our mouth, that's kind of the landing and the integration of the breath journey. You've got past the peak of the mountain, and we slow down the music, we slow down our breaths, and I tell people, notice your heart rate, notice all the sensations in your body, completely relax your body, and it's an amazing feeling.
That was more intense than I was expecting.
And this is the difference. You mentioned how many different styles. The breath, the way in which we're breathing is very similar to Wim Hof, but it's a softer way of doing it, which means again that it allows you to quieten the mind and really connect deep, because you're not super focused on I'm breathing and breathing and breathing. You can breathe at the rhythm that you're breathing. Try do that for 40, 45 minutes. Once you get past the first 30 minutes, something is very likely to move.
So that, for example, is like a rough, like one set. And then would you do like a breath hold and then go again or something? Or how would you do what would you do 45 minutes of that exact breathing thing?
So you can bring in breath holds, but with the practice that I'm refining at the moment, we basically breathe straight like that for 40, 45 minutes.
Wow.
Now, the interesting thing is that most people at the end of the session, if I ask them, guys, how long did we breathe for? They will say 5, 10, 15 minutes, and we might have been there for over an hour. What's happening there is that in the few minutes that you were doing it, your mind was still busy, you were thinking. That mind ends up switching off. You're bypassing that thinking mind, everything slows down. And some people get experiences where they feel they're somewhere else, right? They're kind of nearly like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
So my job as a facilitator is to make sure that when they're disconnected to the brain, that they don't lose the connection to their breath, right? So I'm cueing them, I'm reminding them. I might use touch to put my hand on their belly to make sure, push my hand up towards the ceiling so that they're keeping doing it. If there's a breath or they stop breathing in that pattern, to try and bring them back into that breath without getting them back into the mind. And it's, a lot of people label it as trauma informed because it can bring up some stuff.
Very cool. Thank you. Have we got any client success stories, particular ones you wish to share?
I think, I've shared a couple of examples. For me, because of my background and because of the situation that I had through the burnout due to, let's say, work, the ones I hold most at heart are some of those people in the corporate environment that, after a number of sessions, they say to me, I found a whole new sense of calm in my day work, right? So I had one client where this was a one-to-one client, and they're quite competitive both in work but also in their athletic performance, and we did some breath training. This was a mixture of oxygen advantage together with what we just described with the conscious connected breath. And they basically just said that they felt they were more in control when they were in work. They're in a very high stress environment and they're able to deal with that stress much better. The other one, which is at the team level, I already described, right? To bring a team that worked in silos, and through breath work and some of the business coaching, to allow them to connect and start to build healthy conflict within that team. For me, that's probably the most, let's say, the one that I hold the highest in terms of examples, right? Because you're not just changing an individual and what they're doing within that team, you're improving the individual's performance within the team, but also how that team works together. And for me, that's where you're going to get exponential growth from a team perspective, which is going to have a knock-on effect on other teams within that business as well.
Yeah, interdependence is
And that's why for me, it's this, I talk about, I'm a business coach and I'm a breathwork coach, and I purposely say they're not mutually exclusive,
mhm.
right? Because I believe that in order to work with someone to improve their performance in their professional life, which is typically why people come to me, we need to also look at some of the deeper things that are happening in their life, whether it may be purpose and value, whether it may be a nervous system reset, managing that stress. And in order to do that, then they can go and perform even better.
Yeah. Are you still involved at all in like the software world? Do you coach software founders?
Yeah, I advise early stage companies. That's typically always with the founders, and that's a pure commercial strategy type advisory work that I do. And then I do CEO and founder coaching. A lot of the time that revolves around their corporate strategy as well. But as I said, then it spills into other aspects of their life. And with a number of those people, they've shown curiosity to do some of the breathwork things just to purely manage themselves. And in general, it's always around leadership that I'm working with people, and that's why we're launching this leadership course. And I always talk about this idea of self leadership, right? If you don't work on yourself and you don't become your own self leader, how can you expect to be a good leader for other people?
Mm.
And that's why I say they're not mutually exclusive.
What do you think about the like the landscape of startups at the moment? I'm thinking particularly in software. I presume you're familiar with things like Replit.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, and what advice would you give to someone who's, they're going to start a SaaS business or whatever? Like, what do you think you should be looking out for?
It's interesting because the big discussion at the moment is, I think there can't be any startup without AI. But if there's different types of AI, right? And there's some of the AI where we see some of these startups that they're being built within minutes. You never really own that stack, which may or may not be an issue. But we're seeing a lot of companies that are building businesses that then have limitations to scale. So
Mm,
you're losing control over the foundations of your business. My fear around it is that AI is 100% a necessary ingredient for any business to compete in today's world. But I don't think it's necessarily the golden bullet or the silver bullet that people are talking about, if that makes any sense.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be an interesting 2 to 3 years or to see
Yeah.
how this all plays out.
What I think it's done is that it's allowed people, solopreneurs, let's say, for example, to compete at a different scale, right, or to compete on a different level,
Hmm.
and it's allowing creative people to compete with much bigger organizations that have a lot more funds at their disposal.
Yeah.
It's challenged as well the investor community, because now all of a sudden some startups are showing that they can do similar, same, maybe even better with a lot less investment and cash and people. So there's an interesting conversation happening there in the investor community as well. But there is no doubt about it that it's a skill set and it's a capability that every single founder is playing around with and should be playing around with.
I think what it shows, and I'm specifically like AI agents for building web applications and stuff, is that you realize how hard it is. It's not just the thing, if that makes sense. Like once you get into it, you know, UX and and all this stuff comes into it, and it's just like, yeah, it's not just the idea. You also need all these other skills to be able to bring something like that together.
I mentioned the advisory work that I do, right? So I've got a different brand to the coaching brand where we do the advisory work to founders, and it's typically early stage founders. And we're typically brought in when they have an idea, they might have sold their first project or deal, and they're like, okay, that's proven, now we need to scale it. And a lot of founders realize that, there's tons of great ideas out there that never made it to market. Because to your point, I can have a good product, but getting that product in the hands of the right customers and convincing those customers that you're solving a problem in a way that's different from all the other options that they have to solve that problem, because it's rare that you're the only solution to their problem, is an art in itself, right? There's an art and a science to sales. And I guess that's why, we've been able to be successful as commercial advisors, because it's not as easy as just having a good product. So even if you're able to use AI to build it, you still need either the know-how or the people within your business to bring it to market.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like brand is a big, brand and distribution and social are probably like things that need to be integrated into something like that, do they?
There's a big trend at the moment around with CEO founders around their brand, right? So some of the most successful startups at the moment, they're building a massive brand around their CEO. So their CEO is becoming the true face of the company, right? Because it gives them an identity, it gives the company a soul, I guess, right, or a character or something like that that people can connect to all of a sudden. And I think, we've seen people on LinkedIn now even talking about, what's gone wrong in their startup journey and stuff like that. So there's a part of this brand is showing authenticity, which is also showing vulnerability, which is an interesting trend because some people are doing it very successfully, but there's still a lot of people that are less willing to do it. I've come up against it in the breathwork stuff that I'm doing with corporates, because at an individual level, I think everybody now believes in what we've just been talking about and the benefits that can bring to performance. Not everybody is willing to go back into the corporate business and start to suggest to people, hey, we should do breathwork as a team. Because there's still that stigma of, oh, you're doing breathwork because something is wrong with you, and you're not dealing with your work life, or you're too stressed for this work or something like this. But we're seeing a big change in that, right? I've even had a CFO of a pharmaceutical company who took their team out, and we did a session 2 to 3 hours on the beach and then a Q&A at the end. And that was pure breathwork. In that case, there was no business coaching involved. But most of the people that we work through the Team Academy brand is coaching from a business perspective together with the breathwork. So there's always a challenge or a goal that we're given by the leader or the team.
I sent you a question in advance last night. If you could only do 5 habits for the rest of your life, what would they be and why?
Yeah, I really like that one, because a little bit what we talked about, right? My big theory is they should be simple, as short as possible, so that there's a less barrier to actually doing it. And then obviously there needs to be, to your question about the why, there needs to be a benefit that I can see or that I can feel coming out of it. So the first one would be this, as I mentioned, this 5-minute breath meditation, which is really just around the breath awareness and finding stillness in my body. There's a lot of benefits that I get from this because it allows me to start the day slower. I'm a lot less reactive in my everyday. So I would say I feel that this is allowing me to be a better father, a better husband, a better friend, and also better in business. in those moments of stillness, I always follow that with a journaling practice, because even though I'm focused on my nose, the quietness will bring something up. It could be a breakthrough in a thinking process that I've been trying to go through, a challenge that I've been trying to think about, or it surfaces a memory or a goal or something that I had to work through. So I would say 5 minutes of breath work followed by journaling. My journaling practices also can be just a couple of sentences. Sometimes I feel like I need to write and I'll write pages, but it can literally be 3 to 4 sentences down, right? So it's just something that comes up that I want to put down on paper. Something else would be around movement. So at the moment, I'm running a challenge with a bunch of friends of mine. We do it from time to time, and we're doing 100 push-ups a day. It's again, simplicity. It's a WhatsApp group. You don't have to do them all in one go. You can do them throughout your day. When you get them done, you just send a green tick in the WhatsApp group. The amount of times throughout the day that I get the tick and I go, crap, I need to finish mine. You'll do another set, right? But also it's the accountability, right? If you don't put your green tick in there, someone might say, hey, Jason, where's your green tick today? Right? And it's the motivation. And obviously there's a little bit of banter in there, which we have some fun with. But, movement can be any type of movement. For me, the great thing about this is that if I don't run or if I don't train that day, I know at a minimum I've done my 100 push-ups, right? So it literally allows me to tick that box. Something else is just a practice of gratitude, and that can be in many different ways, right? But one thing that I always try to do is not take anything for granted and be appreciative of what we have. Family is definitely high on my list of gratitude, but also some of the small things in life, right? An experience that you've had, a conversation that you had, maybe something a friend might have achieved that day, or, things like that throughout the day that you can be grateful for. I often have my morning coffee and, I look out and I kind of think, life has been pretty good, right? Even though we've gone through our ups and downs, I'm in a good place, and it's a good reminder that keeps you humble as well in whatever it is that you're doing. So that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4.
4, I think, yeah.
For breath work or breath training, right? It'd be crazy for me not to mention that. I know that we've touched upon it a lot, but it's very important to remind that most of us are breathing dysfunctionally, and even before we get into the performance or we get into the emotional side of things, just breathing more correctly or having a more correct breathing pattern can help a lot of things. We talked about blood pressure, heart health. We talked about brain function, our digestion, our concentration, sport performance. It basically does improve and control every part of our life. It's the first thing that we do when we come into this world. It's the last thing that we do when we go out of this world. We do it 22,000 times a day on average, completely subconsciously, but we're doing it dysfunctionally at the moment, most of us. By correcting that one thing, it can have the biggest health benefit in your life. And if you asked me for 5, if it was 1, I would get people to go through a breath training, maintain a breath training practice, and improve the way in which you're breathing.
Awesome. I love them. Yeah, 5 good ones, definitely.
And keep them small and keep them simple. That's for me is the goal.
Yeah, agreed. Apologies if you can hear a dog outside. Can you hear that?
I can. I've got 2 of them myself. I'm surprised you can't hear my 2.
No, I can't. I'm like this, like constantly muting the mic in between. Yeah, next door's dog. It's funny, actually. I tried to use the next door's dog as a mirror. So, because if I'm like, fucking dog, you know what I mean? And then I try and catch it and go, that's a you thing. I mean, when I'm on a podcast, it's not ideal, but it's a good indicator of like where I'm at, how I react to the dog.
I had an experience recently. I don't know if you know Tony Riddle. He goes by the handle of the Natural Lifestylist on Instagram. No. But he has the natural lifestyle philosophy, and I've gone through his coach certification. That was actually the first thing I did when I gave up my job. And he's an ultra barefoot marathoner and does a number of different things. But his whole philosophy is around stripping our life back down, removing all the comforts that we have, and going back to our innate ability to live. And a lot of the time some of the things that we worked through with Tony was as well this ability to control your own reaction. And we went on a family retreat with him where I brought the kids and my wife, Olga, with me. And that was probably about 2 years after going through the certification. And there was 100 humans at this thing, right? We all slept in tents for the number of days that we were there. We did breath practices. We did movement practices. We did men's circles, women's circles. We did saunas. We did cold plunge. A number of different things. But it was an absolutely incredible experience. But the reason why I'm telling you that story is that we were doing a sound bath and the kids were playing around because it was a family retreat. And at one stage in the middle of this sound bath and meditation, these 3 kids ran across where we were, screaming and shouting. And I realized in that moment, one of the kids was my son. And at that moment, I was like, fuck. And then I just said, okay, just stay with it. I looked around. I was the only one that even seemed to notice that they were there. And it was a great learning because it shows that, we look for the perfect moment, the quietness and everything to do all these things. But really mastery comes where we can do it in any state, right? And maybe exactly when there is that kind of dog barking in the background or kids running around. If you can do it in that moment in time, then you know that you're making some progress in your practice.
Definitely. Yeah. No, it's a nice way to overload your meditation practice with a bit more.
Yeah, add a stressor.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, mate. What's going on in the future? Anything on the horizon? You got? Is it an ultra coming up?
I have an ultra. It's my first ultra in October, so it's 100K in the Pyrenees, in the mountains here in Spain. A little bit scared about it, but
Savage.
doing the training and getting there. We did a 72K about a month ago, I think, with a bunch of my friends. So that was a good test run to kind of, at least psychologically, we know we can get that far. But still have a lot of training to do to make sure that we get across the finish line. But, I've always been uber competitive. And one of the things that I'm changing about is that, especially with trail running, you kind of tend to have to forget and not be concerned about the pace. And I'm just focused on enjoying myself, pushing myself a little bit, but, obviously make sure that I'm focusing on my breath and keeping everything in check.
Yeah, that long distance. It's quite an interesting map over to like life, isn't it? Like push hard, but not too much, because you need to be like in that low heart rate zone because you've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it because I've done lots of different things, triathlons. I did an Ironman in 2012. But the long distance like that, even with the Ironman, the long distance stuff means that of course we do some speed sessions, but like most of your training is, as you said, in that low heart rate, just plodding along and stuff. And it's really grounding. And also you're spending so much time in nature, right? So I'm getting a lot of benefits from it. The only downside is those long runs, you're spending so much time away. But I'm doing my best to get up early, try get it done as soon as I can and not impact the family too much.
Do you do? I know you mentioned you went with some mates. Do you tend to do most of your long runs with people or on your own?
It's a good mix because during the week I'm an early bird and I like to get out early. So most of my mates won't get up as early as I want to get up to do it. But the long runs, as much as possible, I try and do them with mates. But look, I've done a 55K all by myself. And, when you're doing 55K, you're out there for most of the day by yourself, right? So there's only so many podcasts and things that you can listen to. You're also doing a lot of just in your own head and stuff like that. But apart from the physical tiredness, it's really therapeutic.
Yeah, I like recently. So I was always very good at doing my zone 2 on my own, pretty strict, and then I started doing it with friends. And then now I'm like, I kind of wish I hadn't had it with friends, because now when I have to do it on my own, it's so much harder. Like, it's just so much more boring. Like, when you're, because it's great, especially like zone 2, you can just chat. It's perfect because you don't have to be looking at your heart rate. You know you're in that conversational pace, aren't you? So
it's funny. There's another thing I hadn't realized around it because, we talked a little bit about nasal breathing and, the fact that it allows you to lower your heart rate and everything else. If you think about it, I was chatting to David Jackson, who's a master instructor in Oxygen Advantage, and he was talking about the antisocial aspect of nasal breathing because with your mouth shut and you're breathing out through your throat. He gave me the example that on a run that he did, the same exact run, when he does it by himself versus doing it with someone else, purely through the fact that he's talking to that person and therefore breathing in and out a little bit more through his mouth and just exhaling through his mouth through the act of talking. He told me, what was it, 10 beats per minute higher was his average heart rate on the same exact run.
The same exact run, same exact pace versus talking to someone.
When he's talking, the heart rate is 10 beats per minute higher on average.
That's interesting. I wonder whether there's something going on there, though, on a connection, emotional level or something, that because it doesn't feel as intense, you know?
No, but when you're talking, I mean, it's the most obvious part is that you're inhaling and exhaling more through your mouth when you're talking.
Yeah.
You're dumping more air, right? As we were talking about when you're doing the hyperventilation. So by default, your heart rate is going to increase.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for this. Ciaran, this has been really fascinating, and I had a feeling that we'd have a good chat, and you've given us so much wisdom and lots of interesting stuff that you can think sometimes that you know a lot, like oh yeah, I know Wim Hof, I know a bit about breathwork, and these are the sort of conversations I love where we can wind in and out, deep dive here and there, and certainly, and then the fitness and business space is nicely aligned as well. So thank you. Where should people go if they want to check out your work and all that sort of stuff? Give us a plug.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much to you for inviting me and your questions. I really enjoyed our conversation. So if there's anything at all that people found interesting or they want to find out more, socials, Instagram, Ciaran, CIARAN _breathwork. They can find me on Instagram. And then all the coaching that we're doing together with the breathwork, including this course the leadership course that we're launching in September, it's www.teamacademy.coach, or they can just find me on LinkedIn and they can reach out directly. If there is anyone out there that likes the thought process around this intersection between business and breathwork, leadership and breathwork, and maybe they're a young leader starting out at their career, or they're an aspiring leader, please do reach out, because in September, we're about to launch this course. We're going to keep it to very small groups. There's going to be coaching, there's going to be mentoring, there's going to be skill development, and we will do some breath work and nervous system regulation throughout that 10 weeks as well. So that's going to be launched very soon. So reach out and you'll see more on my LinkedIn in the coming weeks.
Amazing. Thank you. And I will put all that in the show notes and the episode description for people.
Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you again. And have a great day. And I'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Likewise. Have a good one. Cheers.
Thank you. Hey guys, it's me. Just a quick one before you get going. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to my guest and that 15% off you can get from Bear Bar. Go to bit.ly/BearJace for 15% off your first order. Thanks for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.